quick reminder that Exodus Day celebrations are already underway, with the Early Birds and Worms Festival in the mess hall going all night and into the big day tomorrow. More Exodus Day announcements coming up soon. Good evening, Void Sailor crew. This is your captain, Sarahbee. We have explored the dark for so long that sometimes we need reminders of the places we have seen, of the places we come from. We need to jolt our memories from the past loose to fully electrify the present. This is the Void Bulletin, stories from our journey and updates on the Void Sailor and its community. Well, let's get it out of the way. We're wishing a safe Exodus Day to the crew and families of the Void Sailor. We have a lot of celebrations planned for you all tomorrow. As I already mentioned, the Early Birds and Worms Festival is already making a mess of the mess hall. If you've somehow made it this long on this ship and you still don't know what the festival is about, allow me to shed some light on the situation. Hopefully, I don't ruffle any feathers. Every year, on the evening before Exodus Day, celebrations begin at 18.00 HTR with the Early Birds and Worms Festival. The festival has its origins in the very first Exodus Day, or rather, the Exodus from Terra. The Void Sailor's Exodus Day celebrations got underway just a couple of hours ago in the mess hall. The first activities on the schedule were the Evening Flock and the Twilight Hunt, two very controversial activities that celebrate historical accuracies in less than historically accurate ways. I mean, two very honored and historical traditions in the culture of all anthropics. As always, this year's Exodus Day celebrations are sponsored in large part by the Void Sailor Historical Society. This year's evening flock took place from 18.00 HTR to about 19.50 HTR, and, despite my pleas and demands, seems to have somehow involved almost the entire ship. As a reminder and a note, next year's evening flock will be confined strictly to the wind tunnel in the recreation center as an endurance contest rather than a race. The winner of this year's evening flock was once again the Spar family, with a total relay time of 0.82 hours through rotation. Congratulations to the Spar family, who will simply keep last year's trophy and save us the power consumption of recycling it into a new trophy for this year's winners. The history of the evening flock, as I mentioned, dates back to the Exodus itself. Before the Anthropics left the Sol system, we were held captive. We all know the legend of the Anthropics and the associated Landing Day celebrations, and this links directly to that holiday. On the day before the Exodus starship left Sol Terra, an emergency broadcast was received and then relayed around the planet. It informed everyone that Anthropics had taken over the Exodus. All of the hominins on board were dead. The intention was to warn the hominins, but the results were chaos. First, the hominins left on Terra tried to fire their explosive weapons at the Exodus. This failed, however, when all of the escape pods were jettisoned. Empty of any passengers, but full of bodies, these escape pods acted as decoys for the weapons to impact in place of the ship. From the ground on Sol Terra, hominins and anthropics alike watched in wonder as the night sky lit up with the flashes of thousands of the most powerful explosions they had ever seen. The event left communications in shambles, and most of the hominin tools stopped working after that. The sight also stirred and panicked the anthropics. Those with the ability to fly took to the skies in massive swarms, thousands and some millions strong, headed for hominin space launch facilities. The entire population wanted off of the planet, and those who could fly had an advantage over everyone else. their journey wasn't smooth, with many millions dying that day in flight and on the ground. The swarms overtook launch facilities, and many planetary launch vehicles were lost shortly after takeoff when flying anthropics tried to swarm them in the air. That, in its most basic and broad overview terms, is where we get the tradition of the evening flock. Traditionally on Elith, we hold a grand race that spans for many hundreds of sprint. As a side note, the Historical Society working through the Exodus archive have discovered an archaic word that we think is the basis of where our measurement of sprint come from. The mil-a? The mile? The mil? We aren't sure how it was pronounced, but we do recognize some of the characters and writing as ancient forms of some of our modern symbols. Where was I? Oh! The tradition of the evening flock on Elith spans the entire 12 hours of the Early Birds and Worms Festival, and traditionally has its endpoint at the village that is holding the festival for its region. Some races on Elith are longer than others, but the longest traditional race before we left for our mission was the Allium Daughters of the Founders Flock. This well-known and historic race had a reign of at least 45 years before we left home, and spans a wing-shattering 553 sprint. 553 sprint is the longest recorded and confirmed distance that an anthropic managed to travel and still make it to the Exodus before it left Solterra. There aren't many official records from that time, and we aren't sure why. We know that at least in part, the Exodus had only so much memory for storing those kinds of records, but it still should have been sufficient enough to have left our society with more knowledge than it did. For those of you who may be unfamiliar with the design specifications of the Void Sailor, our ship was made in large part from the recycled or reused pieces of the Exodus. The Void Sailor is slightly larger, but can hold only around 1/10 as many crew as what crammed into the Exodus. We have an opportunity to discover the truths of the past. That is why the Historical Society exists. That is why the Historical Society will be left alone. That is why you will join the Historical Society. The Historical Society. No. 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 Historical Society must know. We must know. We must know. The knowledge binds us. We must know. We must know. Thank you to the Void Sailor Historical Society for sponsoring this year's evening flock. While the evening flock isn't too gruesome of a celebration, the other traditional Exodus Eve opening celebration is the Twilight Hunt. And as much as I would like to ban it on this starship in perpetuity and leave that violent celebration in the past, I have been informed by several lieutenants and the chief of security that doing so would be insensitive to certain members of our crew and might cause morale issues. So I let it continue, year after year. It looks like the Historical Society has sponsored this segment of the bulletin as well, and would like me to give a history of where the Twilight Hunt comes from. Quote, "To help certain crew members better understand why this tradition is necessary." End quote. Fine. Do you at least have a little scripted blurb for me, or... Oh. No, I'm just gonna give a brief history, quote, "in my own words," end quote. Fine. In my own words, The Twilight Hunt was a massacre, and we shouldn't celebrate it. There. I'm sorry, no, I'll explain it. The Twilight Hunt celebrates the beginning of our true freedom as species of the Mother and anthropics of the stars. I'll explain it. We don't know much about where we came from and what happened on Sol Terra. As the story goes, by the time we reached Elif, the information was already gone. But nobody knows for sure what happened. Except maybe the Void Sailor Historical Society. So, instead, I'll tell you the common myth of the origins of the Twilight Hunt. At the same time that winged anthropics were taking to the skies to head for spaceports, there were other groups of anthropics who had no hope of escape. Among those with the most grievances with the hominins were the simians, a group that was already closely related to the hominins, but were very different from other anthropics. All anthropics these days, on this ship, back home on Elif, we all share some commonalities. First of all, we are predominantly winged creatures, as winged creatures had a better chance of escape to the Exodus before it departed. Anthropics who couldn't fly had lower chances of escape, but some obviously still made it. Simians had lower chances just like all other non-flying anthropics, but... have you ever met a simian? No, you haven't. All anthropics who made it to the Exodus were in some way or another part hominin. We are derivations of them, mixed with something else. Something that existed in a pure form back on Terra. Something we lost by being created. By running away. But the simians weren't like that. They were never mixed with the hominins to create a new thing. Instead, they were changed somehow. They lost their pure form, but in a different way. They retained most of it. The simians were, as far as we know, the first step in the process of creating anthropics. And they were angry. In one city on Terra, the simians took advantage of the chaos of the announcement of the Exodus departure. They stormed through the city, killing all hominins in their path until they reached the governmental office buildings. Using stolen hominin weapons, they set off an explosion that leveled the whole city and carved out a massive, 2-sprint-wide crater. This event marks the start of the Twilight Hunt and is signaled in modern celebrations by light or fireworks displays. Then, the festival truly gets underway. The Twilight Hunt is an all-night-long game of hide-and-seek. A game you do not want to lose if you're playing by traditional rules, which I will not allow on my ship. The game is very outdated and inspires the worst hominin instincts in all anthropics. But it works like this. First, only non-flying anthropics may participate. It is a ground-based competition. Next, there are 2 main goals to the competition. The goals are in direct conflict with each other, which makes strategy about the game quite an interesting topic among the most morbid historical scholars. The first goal is to hide, and to not be found by anyone. The second goal is to catch someone and subdue them. You cannot win the contest if you have been subdued, but you can win the contest if you have not subdued someone and managed to stay completely hidden. On Elif, the boundaries of the competition are clearly outlined, and in some cases even walled in to prevent participants escaping. On the Void Sailor, the competition is confined to certain decks. It also ends much less violently here, although subduing competition is still part of the night. Back on Terra during the original Twilight Hunt, the scene was one of horror. Once the simians had completely destroyed a hominin city, leaving nothing behind, the chaos just deepened. Across the planet, anthropics and simians alike began to kill any hominins that they could find. Breakdowns in relationships between the anthropics' different groups and friction with the simians meant that before long, the situation turned into a free-for-all. The legend goes that when we killed our creators, we inherited their evil. Old food web relationships that our non-hominin ancestors relied on came back to life in a new and horrific way. Anthropics began to hunt each other. One of the few remaining pieces of historical accuracy we have is a broadcast that came from Terra right before the Exodus left the system. It was about 30 hours through rotation after the broadcast when it was received, and Terra looked like it was going to be left a dead ruin. The hominins were all presumably dead, and any that remained wouldn't make it long in a world completely overtaken by anthropics with superior capabilities. But the anthropics who were left surely couldn't save Terra. It was dying even before the anthropics were created, and they would no longer have the tools to prevent complete ecological collapse there. The food web was re-establishing itself, and the people of the Exodus watched in horror as the home they left behind began to eat itself, like a snake wrapped around to eat its own tail. The actual history of the celebrations is a bit muddled. The official records from Elif state that, quote, "The celebration of the Twilight Hunt is meant to honor those friends and family we left behind on Terra, and has never been a state-sanctioned opportunity for violence," end quote. But, you see, I have these logs from one of my ancestors who was on the Exodus, and, well, I'm just not sure if the official story matches up with what actually happened. Here's a quote from my great-grandmother's logs.
One year, calling it Exodus Day, well, makes sense. It's just a race. The Twilight Hunt. It's just an excuse. Forced participation? You need food. It's the same thing that we left. We need to find a habitable place soon.
Huh. I must have just towed the line on rule breaking with that one. No alarms? Okay. So I don't want to say that the official story is hiding something, but it sounds to me like perhaps the Twilight Hunt as a celebration is not just outdated, but fully a cover-up. Hey, I said it sounds to me like, and perhaps. Fine. For legal purposes, and because this particular Void Bulletin is brought to you by the Void Sailor Historical Society, this is purely speculative opinion on my part, and in no way reflects the official views or are condoned by the Elif Council of Anthropic Governance, the Void Sailor Historical Society, or the Terra Reclamation Project. Fine. And I will also stick to only the official, legally sanctioned history of the Twilight Hunt celebrations from now on. Let's just get through this. The Twilight Hunt was first celebrated on the Exodus, just before the discovery of Elif. Once Anthropics had settled the moon, it continued to be celebrated by all the major cities there. Depending on the region, the Twilight Hunt may be celebrated slightly differently, but the core two goals and rules remain the same. As for officially sanctioned histories of the celebrations, that's all I am allowed to say, but... Oh, come on, we all know it! Since I am the captain of the Void Sailor, I do get some say in use of the ship's resources for different activities and holiday celebrations. The way we celebrate the Twilight Hunt here on this ship is as restrictive as I am allowed to make it. 2 decks of the ship, confined to the officers' quarters space, adults only, no maiming allowed, and we don't eat the losers as breakfast. Wow. The Historical Society sure is... something. so touchy about this subject. I think I have a lot more to announce about tomorrow's activities, but you can find a summary, which was posted in your virtual letterbox yesterday, or on the Void Sailor Activities and Events calendar. Make sure to subscribe to the calendar through your My Sailor account for access. Before the end of the bulletin, I do have several non-Exodus Day announcements. First, congratulations to Faye Onk on the promotion to Chief Communications Officer. The absence that had been left by Rav Far's commitment to the Historical Society left a gap that was really starting to slow operations. Thank you for stepping up and being so reliable in a time of transition. Next, I would like to remind all engineering crew that the updates to the ship's shield generator should be complete sometime next week. Thank you for your continued patience while the main lifts are down to accommodate this big overhaul. Lastly, I would like to formally announce that I am directing the Historical Society to increase their efforts to recover information from any old Exodus systems that remain in the Void Sailor. This effort is about to expand into a massive undertaking and will require a reshuffle of staff. I have decided that because of the sensitive nature of the materials that the Historical Society will be working on, only those who have become chief officers first may be promoted into the Historical Society. This will create upward flow through chain of command on our ship and help everyone keep some goals in mind as we sail out here through space. The Void Sailor Historical Society thanks you. The Void Sailor Historical Society wants you. We want to know. We want to know you. We must know you. We must know you. Know you. Know you. Know you. Know you. Know you. Know Good night, Void Sailor crew. Have a safe Exodus Day.
The Void Bulletin is a narrative, science fiction horror podcast by Livewire Multimedia Stories. Captain Sarahbee is voiced and created by Elizabeth Fullman, who can be found as @CaptainSarahbee on Tumblr and Blue Sky. Captain Sarahbee's model art is by Razzmatazd, who can be found on YouTube @Razzmatazd. This project is written by Elizabeth Fullman, co-executive produced by Gwen Fullman and Elizabeth Fullman, with music by Elizabeth Fullman. If you enjoyed what you listened to, please consider supporting us at patreon.com/Livewire Multimedia Stories. There you will get exclusive access to early episodes and fun perks like access to polls and our Discord server, where we collaborate on projects and share resources. If you like this project and would like to learn more about it or any of our other projects, please follow us on our social media accounts. We are on Tumblr @Livewire Media, on Instagram @Livewire Multimedia, and on YouTube @Livewire Multimedia Stories. But really, the best way to support us is to share this with a friend. Thank you for listening.